Hello everyone, and welcome to our first of the Brexit Chat videos that we're going to be hosting for you on YouTube, and we're going to be looking at the current developments in Brexit today. And basically this is going to be a video that we're going to be putting out every week to give you a bit of an update into exactly how we think that Brexit could be going, and also the key factors driving the moves through markets, and obviously how that is going to impact on your trading. So we see that Parliament is back in session and they are looking to try and hold Boris Johnson to account. Now, how does this affect sterling going forward? Now, sterling has looked to remain positive throughout all the last month, really, as the prospects of no deal Brexit have been gradually priced out by the market, and that's where we've seen sterling strengthening. And it's an interesting impact also on FTSE 100 as well, because there is a negative correlation still at play through FTSE 100 and sterling, which means that when sterling strengthens, FTSE 100 underperforms, and that continues to be the key factor. So in terms of the key game changers, we're still looking out for the prospects of now what Parliament can do is calling a vote of no confidence in Johnson. Well, it doesn't look as though a vote of confidence is going to be called as yet, because Parliament is still, certainly publicly, Parliament is still worried that Boris Johnson is going to go back on his word, and he could still pull the UK out of the European Union on the 31st with no deal, and that is what their main fear is. Privately, I think it's more a case of the fact that they would see that it's a very difficult general election. If it were to be called, it would be a very difficult general election for Johnson to frame it as the people versus Parliament, and that means that it could well become a very populist election, and Boris Johnson would go into that election in the driving seat, I believe, if it were to be called before the 31st of October. So if the election is called after the 31st of October, I think that gives the opposition parties much more bargaining in terms of how they can position themselves for Brexit. They can also frame Boris Johnson as a leader who didn't deliver once again on Brexit, and I think that would be the key factor there. A couple of other factors that could happen. We've got Johnson, who could even pull out a deal from the EU. That is still highly unlikely, and that is possibility of that is still on the table, but again, the EU don't seem to be willing to play ball, and it seems as though that Johnson is not really coming forward with any real new proposals in terms of how the backstop can be sorted out. And the other factor is, on the 31st of October, we could see the European Union basically saying no to an extension. Now that would certainly put the cat amongst the pigeons, and that would be the UK crashing out of the EU with no deal. What we can see here is that certainly FTSE 100, for example, continues to underperform. I think I can put in the performance basis of FTSE here, you can see that since the market turned around, you could argue on the 12th of around the 12th of August, we've seen a recovery of around about 5% on FTSE. If you compare that to the DAX, it's around 10%. So the reason behind that is this strength of FTSE. Look at that, since the 12th of August. Sorry, the strength of sterling. Sterling has strengthened also 5% or so. You've got that against the euro and also against sterling. Both around, against the dollar. Both have strengthened around about 5% since those lows. Interesting that FTSE 100 has underperformed DAX by around about 5%. So that would go to show you that I think there is a degree of underperformance that we get from FTSE 100 due to that strength of sterling. Other key charts that we're looking out for are the sterling futures. We can see that those net sterling futures continue to track how cable moves. Certainly, I think that as markets have moved to price out a no-deal Brexit to an extent, they've been closing short sterling futures, and that has helped to drag sterling higher. In terms of volatility, it remains elevated, so that would suggest that the market is still very worried about how this whole situation could pan out. This is a 3-month sterling options volatility, against the dollar, and you can see it's still very elevated compared to where it was certainly back over the summer, where there was less prospect of a no-deal Brexit. So lots of interesting trends that are going on. We've still got the strengthening trend on sterling, and you can still see that rallies are being sold into on euro sterling, so that's continued sterling strength. Similarly on cable, it is interesting that we've had a bit of a pullback on cable today below 23.80, which was a bit of a breakout level. But I think anything between 23 figure and 23.80, if you can see sterling finding support against the dollar, is still fairly strong position. With regards to FTSE 100, that recovery is already starting to roll over. Bit of a rebound today, as we've seen that sterling has fallen, interestingly fallen quite sharply on the day there today. And that has allowed FTSE 100 to rebound. But we continue to see that FTSE 100 is a bit of a laggard and a bit of a, certainly during the rally moments, it's a market that is underperforming, shall we say. So that's how we're sitting on Brexit at the moment. We're still looking out for lots of more action, I think, in front of the 31st of October, especially considering we've got that no-deal Brexit still on the table potentially, but also Parliament back in session to hold the government to account. So lots of volatility, I think, still to play out in this one. So thanks a lot for joining us for this video, and we'll speak to you again soon. Thank you.